Welcome to Stop Overthinking, the podcast for overthinkers, people pleasers, and perfectionists who want to feel calm and confident enough to handle whatever life sends your way. I'm your host, Kristen Odegaard, a women's life and mindset coach, lifelong educator, and recovering perfectionist. Welcome back to another episode of the Stop Overthinking podcast. We have a guest with us today. LauraAura is an alignment coach for driven women, guiding them to learn how to honor their energy and truly listen to what they want instead of what they've been told they should. Laura is a vibrant speaker, coach, author, and host of the Gutsy podcast, which is fantastic, by the way. She will be the first person to push you out of your comfort zone and the last one to hug you as you head to the next level of your life. So thank you for joining us, Laura.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You and I talk about a lot of the same kinds of things. We work with driven women and a lot of the mindset pieces that are limiting them from where they really want to go and showing up as the woman really want to be. You also have the Gutsy podcast, which has been going for 5 years now. Is that correct?
five and a half ish.
Where did the name Gutsy come from?
That's a good question. Nobody's asked me that in quite some time, by the way. So the word gutsy actually originated from the thing that was happening before the Gutsy podcast. Quick backstory. I ran a branding agency for 16 and a half years. And I just recently sold that business to go full-time as a speaker and a coach, which I'm just loving this season. And thank you. While I was building the branding agency, though, I became incredibly intrigued by the thoughts that I was having and the thoughts that other entrepreneurs specifically at that time were having. And I wanted to have honest, raw conversations about the things that we were all thinking and feeling, but didn't feel like we had a space where we could actually talk about it. So I started interviewing people on, it was called the Green Couch Project at the time. It was a, in-person production. There still is a green couch that I have. And the tagline for that was "Spill Your Gutsy." And that word gutsy just stuck. It rang true for so many different things in life, and not just in entrepreneurialism, but in just general life and making decisions. And it just kind of became the core of my mantra. So Gutsy is a huge part of my life and of the things that I teach to the people in my world.
What does Gutsy mean to you? Like, what does that embody for you and your coaching and you as a person?
Yeah, I love that you're asking me that, because it's the question that I ask all my guests at the end of each episode. And it's fascinating. And I'll come back and tell you something about that too in a second. But to me, Gutsy is giving yourself permission to be who you are and to do those things, right? It doesn't have to make sense to anybody. It doesn't have to look the way that it quote unquote should. It's really just about being yourself, doing the things that you want to do, giving yourself a chance to try, to take the risk, to step out and do something new, to be the person that shows up in a room wearing, bright colors when everyone else is wearing, neutrals, right? It's just embracing all that you really are and allowing yourself to be that in every aspect of your life. And when you do that, you step into something I call alignment. It's not my word. It's just my version of it, is when you're just truly being yourself, doing the things that you love to do, things just get to be easier. Listen, like, it's not hard to be yourself. The things that are actually hard is all the stuff that you're doing to try to not be yourself.
Yes, I love that. Let's talk more about that, because I think my audience can really resonate with that. I personally can resonate with that in terms of people pleasing, not feeling worthy, and the whole imposter syndrome and all of the shoulds that you already mentioned. Where do you see that showing up the most? Like, what kind of things are you seeing with your clients and working through that are limiting them?
My gosh. So, I mean, you mentioned one of them for sure, which is people pleasing. That's just this deep, deep need to make everybody else happy. Something that I've realized is there seems to be this black or white with people pleasing, where it seemingly feels like you're either helping everybody and going to the nth degree to do everything for everybody, or you're a selfish jerk and you don't like to help anybody. And the truth is, there is a whole scale in between. It's not an either or situation. It's really about being intentional about helping other people without putting yourself last. And so this reprioritization to make yourself just as important as everything and everyone around you, it's a mind shift. It's a habit that has to be undone. But it's I'm telling you, it's one of the top things that stops, especially women, from moving forward. How is this going to affect this person? Well, if I don't do this, then I'm going to upset them. The underlying root of people pleasing too is often some sort of validation.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe it's a safety mechanism from something that you learned in childhood, right? It's a much deeper issue, but I can tell you that you can free yourself of it, but it has to be intentional. I mean, any positive change has to be intentional, right? And it's all about getting out of your head. It's all about shifting your thoughts and changing your behaviors and moving differently. And people pleasing is no different.
I know with my clients that one of the things that comes up with people pleasing and talking about shedding that persona is the fear that's underneath that in terms of rejection. Like you said, they want acceptance. So the opposite of that is going to be then loss of connection or rejection. And that can be really paralyzing. And I'm just wondering how you address that with people when they come up to that, fear of whatever, loss of the relationship or maybe just in the moment.
First, I want to say yours are real, right? When you're experiencing them, or if this is something that you've grown up with or have lived with for a really long time, that stuff can be really challenging. But I also want to empower you to know that you don't have to continue to live like that, right? Something that I've realized in digging into people pleasing even further just recently is I'm realizing that the people pleasing actually is a little bit manipulating. And it's not something that people love to hear, but let me explain, because when you're in people pleasing mode, there is some sort of expectation of a return. I want you to do something for me. I'm going to hold this and keep tally. I want you to love me. I want you to validate me. I want you to like me, right? It's often a very unspoken, subconscious expectation.
Right. Even that they want a feeling from the other person.
Feeling?
They can control that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so what we have to do is first get to the root of what's happening, right? What is that fear? What is that expectation? What is that void that's happening? And then we have to be willing to do that for ourselves. Right? If you're looking for love and validation from other people, how can you love and validate yourself first? How can you shift into this place where I feel good in me, in my skin, in my movements, knowing that the right people will stay in my world? And if somebody's going to leave, it's because they're not supposed to be here anymore, right? And I know that that's a much bigger conversation, but what we have to do is start to build the confidence within ourselves to know that you can give yourself everything that you need. You don't have to go outside of yourself. You don't have to expend yourself to get these things from other people.
Yes. And I've found even when I would first hear that about giving yourself what you need, it's so against what you hear from culture, society, whatever. I grew up in a time where it was like other people were responsible for my emotions and I was responsible for them. Don't make them mad. This is how you can make her happy, or those kinds of things. Very little self-responsibility and ownership of your own stuff. So hearing that I need to generate that for myself, it's like, whoa, what?
Yeah. And it can feel daunting, right? And I just want everybody to know, like, making these types of shifts, there are no quick fixes. There is no hack, right? You can't purchase something that's going to change your life overnight. I'm all about great tools and resources to help lead you and educate you, but you're undoing habits. That's what all this is. It's a habit. And when you have a habit locked in, it takes intentional work to shift it. And so, I just know that it can be a really discouraging journey sometimes, but I just want to let everybody know that's listening, if you're going through this right now, it can and will change, but you have to give it the time that it needs to.
What have you found personally that's on the other side of people pleasing when you're able to shed some of the masks that you're wearing and those people pleasing behaviors? What are the good things that you're noticing that come out of that?
My gosh, so many things. So first, just personal and mental freedom. When you're in people pleasing mode, the amount of time that you spend thinking about everything and everyone else is absurd.
No kidding.
And
Agreed.
you really have no idea until you stop doing it, right? And so when you're constantly dodging and pivoting and what if and do this and all this stuff, you can't think about your own stuff. You can't do your own things. You just don't have the capacity for it. So you gain back a lot of your time, you gain back a lot of your energy, and you gain back capacity, right? When you're not worried about everything and everyone 24 hours a day,
Right.
you have the capacity to get your next idea, to want to go and try new things, right? Like you start to feel alive again. And when you are not seeking that validation outside of yourself and you have started to give it to yourself, your confidence starts to go through the roof, right? You move differently, you make decisions differently. And I think that it really helps because it puts you in a position where you then get to help and support people, which is very, very different than people pleasing, right? This is an intentional choice. Now I want to do this for you, but I'm not taking all of you back with me, right? I'm not absorbing your challenge or your problem or the worry of the situation or the underlying fear. Like I'm not absorbing that anymore.
Right.
That stays in the situation. But you know what? I can come in and I can make an intentional decision to support you, and then I can step back out, and that's okay, right? Like it gives you back.
I love that. And one thing I noticed as well, too, is I was carrying around a lot of resentment towards other people, that they weren't acting the way I thought they should. Like, I'm doing XYZ, and therefore you should be doing this sort of thing then, too. Like, it was this reciprocal sort of thing. And that's not to say that there isn't give and take in a relationship. It was, like you said, that I was trying to control it with my expectations of them. And then when that didn't happen, it was a slow burn, but there was a lot of resentment. Like, I do all of these things. I show up this way. Why aren't you? And so I know for me, one of the things that I noticed when I was able to gain back my time, my energy, and spending so much time processing why they weren't doing what I thought they should be doing or could be doing or whatever, like getting rid of that, which doesn't feel good anyway, to be able to do what I want with my brain.
Exactly.
Amazing.
To be able to have the time and capacity to do the things that you really want to do that are important in your immediate world, right? Like when you're busy jumping every time somebody asks you to, like it's no wonder you can't move the business forward or book the trip or start a new hobby or hang out with your friends or whatever it is that you're wanting to do, right? Like it's easy to talk yourself out of those things. But when you have that time back, it's like, no, I'm prioritizing, like I'm going to do this. I'm not going to stop what I'm doing because someone else needs or wants me to. Now, that's not to say like there are life situations, right? Sometimes it's all hands on deck or an emergency happens or somebody just really needs you in the moment. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about the daily stuff that you're doing that takes you out of your own center and out of your own focus, because that resentment that you were feeling, I would imagine a lot of that came from not only they weren't doing or acting the way you wanted them to, but you probably also were not being fulfilled on your own.
Yeah. And when you're so concerned with what other people should be doing, could be doing, might be doing, all of those things, there isn't time to really dwell on yourself. And I think, for some people that might be intentional because they're not ready to take a look at themselves and do some of that work, but still has an overall positive effect because you can be you. And, like you, when I heard more about people pleasing being manipulative, and it's like, oh, that really makes sense. And the thing is that you're not being you which means it's really hard to connect, like really have a connection with that person in that relationship. So all the things you're doing, tying yourself up in knots to try and get this connection, the validation, the love, any of those things, but it's not really you. So you're caught in this endless cycle. So really to build connection is to shed some of those people-pleasing behaviors. And, that was just fascinating to me to kind of recognize, and again, counterintuitive to so much of what we hear.
Absolutely.
You have a process that you use as you are coaching people about getting out of your own way and getting your power back. Can you tell us a little bit more, just the history, where this came from, and then we'll talk about the process itself?
Yeah, for sure. So, the number one thing that stops people from doing anything or moving forward or making change is themselves. It's the thoughts in our head. It's the conversations that we're having. It's the fears, the doubts, the worries, the what ifs, all that junk, right? And I know this because I was one of them, and I'm not void of it now. I just have better tools in my toolkit, and now I teach it. So this process, I did not realize that I was developing a process until later, but I was in a situation. So it was just, at the height of COVID, and I had to make a lot of big, hard decisions, and I'm sitting in my basement alone after having a team that I had to let go and a business that was spiraling, and it was awful, right? And I realized in that moment that I hadn't asked myself in a very long time, well, what does Laura actually want? I had built, talk about people pleasing. I had built my business off of my insecurities. I was people pleasing to the core because my root of people pleasing is abandonment. And so when I can recognize that I'm people pleasing because I don't want people to leave, it's a really unhealthy cycle, but I was able to recognize it and to release that. Mm-hmm. So I realized all this is coming to me, right? And I'm like, okay, but all these thoughts, right? The what ifs and the hows and this and that. And I just started moving differently. I started making decisions differently. I started leaning into stuff differently. And what I realized after a couple of months of doing this, I was able to save the business. I was able to restructure everything. I started to be happy again, right? I started to have money again. Like all these things started to change. And I'm like, okay, well, what did I do? Because one, I'm curious, but two, someone else might benefit from this too.
Sure.
And I realized that I learned how to get out of my head. I learned a process, and I documented it. I was sitting out back drinking coffee one day, which is where I get 90% of my downloads, by the way. It's either sitting out back with coffee or driving in my car. That's where I get my clarity. And I'm sitting out back and I'm drinking my coffee, and I have a notepad with me because I get ideas. I know that I do. And I was like, oh my God. Okay. I'm LauraAura, right? Aura is all about the energy and the feelings and your expansiveness and just like the goodness that you put out and radiate out into the world. And I'm like, Aura, what if that's an acronym? And I started like punching this down, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's a system in my name, the system to getting out of your own way. And so the Powerback Process is an acronym, AURA. And it is a method intended to help you shift your thoughts in the moment so that you can break cycles and move forward.
I love it. And being that this is the Stop Overthinking podcast, you have the right audience here to learn more about this process.
Feels quite aligned, if I must say so myself.
Tell us more.
Yes. So the very first thing is A, which is awareness. My friends listening, you cannot change anything if you are not aware of it. I'm sure this is not the first time you have heard it, but maybe it'll sink in a little bit differently today. And awareness is nothing more than noticing, catching, right? Catching the thought, catching the feeling, noticing when your chest starts to get tight, acknowledging when your brain starts to spiral, when you start having all these thoughts, when you start coming up with all these situations, right? Like, there it is. Okay. We're just noticing, because what that does is the habit of overthinking, because it's also a habit, it happens subconsciously, which means it's happening in the background, like a TV running. You know that it's on, but don't really know what's playing, right? When we build awareness, you immediately come back into your conscious mind in a present moment, which is where you have the ability to now actually change something. Okay. So awareness is the first thing. I want you to notice your thoughts. I want you to notice your feelings. I want you to notice your body. When you do that, you catch it. Then you can go to the second step, which is you to unpack it. So unpacking it can be as simple or as elaborate as you would like it to be. We don't have to go down every childhood path that you've ever existed on. Sometimes it's just a quick validation to yourself. I'd like to look at unpacking like talking to your younger child. So if you think about getting back in touch with your inner child, how would you speak to a child that's feeling big emotions, that's worried or scared or spiraling? So if you think about like actually kind of getting down on your own level, and let's get curious. Unpacking is about getting curious. Oh, I wonder where this came from. Right. And I know that you guys can't see me, but I've got my hands on my chest, right? Sometimes you can rub up and down your arms. I wonder where this came from. Did something happen that made me start to feel like this? There it is again. And we're just starting to really nurture it differently instead of beating ourselves up, because that's what we tend to do, isn't it?
Yes.
My gosh, there I go again. Now I'm having the thought. Then, okay, we're not doing that.
Well, and I love the fact that if you are in that curiosity mode, it's almost impossible to be judgmental at the same time as you're being curious, which is generally what we gravitate towards instead. And so we're not beating ourselves up. We're not judging the things that we've noticed. It's just, like you said, more compassionate. It's gentle. It's curious. And then you can decide, because if you're beating yourself up, nobody wants to feel that, then you're pretty much done.
You are, and you're not gonna like joyfully work your way through this, right? Whereas when you're in an unpacking curiosity style mode, it diffuses the feeling. So that's the thing that I want you to notice as you go through this process. What started big eventually mellows out and becomes very grounded. So this next step allows you to start to like immediately diffuse that. Because like you said, curiosity and judgment don't typically exist in the same space. So like I said, you can go down a deeper path if you want to journal this out or feel it out further. But when you're in a very specific moment and you want to work through it, the next thing that you want to do is go into R, which is to reframe it. What is really true, my friend? What is really possible? What is the truth in this situation, or what could be the truth if you can't yet wrap your head around it, right? I like to look at this part as, the unpacking was your inner child. I like to look at reframing as your higher self. What is your inner knowing? What is your groundedness? What is your vision? What is your belief in possibility? And sometimes you gotta leave it before it happens, right? That's an amazing energetic tool. But what is really possible in this situation? What are my options? What can I do differently? Right. And so again, you see that this energy starts to diffuse and we're no longer in like this kind of feeling, but now we're like, okay, now I'm starting to take control again. Now I'm literally back in my body. My mind is no longer spiraling, and I'm reminding myself what's possible. That allows you to then take aligned action. This is where we're moving differently. Because you've gone through this process, right? You have neutralized the situation. You've gotten back into your conscious mind, which means you're back in your present body. And now you can consciously choose what you're going to do instead. Whereas before, if you don't catch the thoughts and you just grab on to the spiral train, you're not choosing any of those things. You're just acting out of old habits and beliefs and ways that you know how to do it. Whereas now, because you've come back into yourself, now you can consciously choose what you're going to do instead. And that movement is towards the thing that's actually true, that's actually possible, that gets you closer to the goal that you want, or, empowers you to move in the direction that supports yourself instead of continues to beat yourself up or to sabotage your life and your goals. So that's the Powerback process. And you can literally do it standing in the grocery line. You can do it in your car. You can do it at your desk. You can journal about it. You can make it whatever you want it to be, but the foundation process is there. And I'm telling you, I have used this to not only change my life, but it is the foundational method that I teach every single student and client that comes into my world, because it is literally the foundation of being able to get out of your own way.
What are some of the most common issues that people are coming to you with when they're coaching? And if we could take one of those and kind of work through the process real quickly, just to really reemphasize all those steps.
The one that's coming up the most and most clearly right now is lack of clarity. I work with a lot of people that have lack of clarity, meaning they're not sure.
Mm-hmm.
They want to make a change, but they're not sure what to do next. And so in this situation, let's say somebody wants to change jobs. Okay, we'll just use that as a neutral situation. So somebody comes to me, they want to change jobs. They start spiraling, right? I can't do this. I've been at this job forever. I don't want to let my coworkers down. What is my family going to say? Especially if you're going to leave an industry. This is where my reputation is, right? Hey, hello, spiral. Let's get aware of that. Okay, I'm noticing that I'm starting to say all those really, really kind of terrible things to myself, right? But they feel real. So I'm noticing them. I'm noticing that I'm saying those things. I notice in my body, I'm starting to feel tightness in my chest. Maybe I'm feeling kind of clammy. Maybe I'm starting to pull my shoulders up to my ears. Maybe I'm biting down my teeth and I'm creating that tension in my jaw, right? Because you're being faced with a decision to make, right? That was kind of the triggering moment here where it's like, are you going to stay at this job or are you going to change it? Mm-hmm. That's what brought this situation on. Now that this person has become aware of all these physical and mental things, they can unpack it. Okay, where is this coming from? Let's talk about this. Well, I don't want to let people down in my world, right? My actual fear here is that I'm not going to be received in a new atmosphere, that I'm going to have to start back at the bottom of something and I'm not going to know what to do. I feel like I've been here for so long and I know what I'm doing and it feels silly or irresponsible to change that. So we're starting to get kind of real with ourselves here. We're unpacking it. We're softening that voice. Mm-hmm. That then allows this person to let's reframe it. Okay, what's really possible here? You've started at a new company before and you figured it out. It doesn't matter what everyone else thinks around you, because what matters most is, are you happy? You're spending 40 to 50 hours a week at this place. I want to be happy at this place. Mm-hmm. When I am at a new job and I'm learning new things and I'm happier with myself, I'm a better person for my kids. I'm not snapping at my spouse anymore. I'm enjoying life again. I'm calling up my girlfriends and we're going out for coffee on Saturday, right? Like I'm more present because I'm happier. I'm not being drained at this job anymore. Right. And then the aligned action is to update the resume, is to send an email, is to change the LinkedIn profile, is to put your information up or start looking on Indeed.com, right? Mm-hmm. Action doesn't mean flip over the table and quit your job and then figure it out. To some people that might work, right? But action is often the small incremental movements towards the thing that you actually want. We think that to have a big change, we have to do big things all at once, where in reality, it's the combination of a lot of small changes in the right direction. Mm-hmm. So this situation that once felt like, had I not gone through this or had the client not gone through this, what are they going to do? They're going to stay at their job. They're going to complain about it. They're going to gossip about it at lunch with the couple of people that they do like. They're going to be snappy at home. They're going to feel drained. They're going to be like, well, I never get to, right? Mm-hmm. Right. That's a decision. Yeah. That is a decision, my friends. You also have the ability to make the decision to make the change. And this process is one of those ways where you can do that.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a pretty common thing that we can see, and you can apply just to other decisions. It makes so much sense, right? I mean, with this, and you can like you said, make it as time consuming or as small as you want. What really resonated with me when you were first talking about it is just the expansiveness of that. And even when we were talking about people pleasing, it is like your focus is very narrow. Or here you're, going into all of the what ifs could go wrong. That focus is so narrow. It doesn't mean that if we spend more time thinking about it in that way, that narrow way, we're going to get some clarity. We have to do something differently. I just want to hammer that home for people too. Like, if I think about it more, if I worry about it more, then it's just going to come to me. No, you need to think about it differently in some way to get a different response. And that's where that expansiveness is, the what ifs, the what's possible, and what else could be true types of scenarios.
I couldn't agree more. And if I can add to that, is one of the ways to do that is to give yourself space, right? Like, literally move. Movement is so incredibly underrated. Like taking a walk, sitting outside on your front porch, putting on your favorite song and dancing ridiculously, right? Like actual physical movement. Get yourself out of the situation for a second. Stop thinking about it. Stop Googling about it and going down these rabbit holes, right? Like you said, it's not going to change things. Thinking about it more, you can't think your way out of a funk. Hey, you got to move. So you got to give yourself the space to do it. But that even is sometimes an obstacle. Like, well, if I do this, then I do that. Okay, do the Powerback process again. Literally, like, if you have to do it 100 times a day until something shifts, then do it 100 times a day. It's a free tool. It's yours now to use.
Do you notice, especially with clients or people who are newer to this process, that the reframing part is difficult because they are in kind of that narrow piece? And how do you help people to have that more expansive thinking beyond, the tunnel or whatever that they're in?
Yeah, the reframe, it can be a little bit challenging at first, especially if this is new to them, or have never gone down this path before, or they're just faced with a new situation. So one of the things that I like to help them do is to even reframe a reframe by saying, okay, if we just took everything and everyone out of the equation, what would you do? What is true in this situation? What do you actually want? Right? And that's even a question of its own. If we take everything and everyone out of the situation, because the mind wants to go to, well, how do I do it? And when would I do this? And how is this going to affect people? And okay, we're even interjecting into our own personal reframe. So if we just take all that and we just sit it off to the side for a second, you don't have to figure out who, what, when, where, or how. We take a really big deep breath. We set that off to the side. Tell me what the reframe is. What's actually possible. And usually they'll just belt it out. And then they're like, and I'm like, no, let it. That's it. That's okay. Again, we're not flipping the table over. You're not burning everything down right now. We're just starting to introduce new concepts. So it's a bit of a reframe in the reframe, but I often find that it's beneficial if you take all of those other things and set it off to the side for a second and then have the conversation in that space. That allows you to get that clarity.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that process. You said the acronym with Aura is easy to remember and is something that we can use right in the moment. So we mentioned you have a podcast, the Gutsy podcast. So certainly for listeners, if you liked this episode, go check out the Gutsy podcast. She has hundreds of episodes at this point, and you can listen. And I know that you're on TikTok and Instagram as well. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so Facebook, TikTok, Instagram are my platforms of choice. My handle is at that LauraAura. And if you liked this process, and you want to dig a little bit deeper into it, if you go to LauraAura.com/foundations, I will send you 5 days of free audio. It's a private podcast where I take this method and I break it down much further. There's a worksheet to help you work through it. So if this is something that you really want to integrate into your world, 10 out of 10 recommend starting there because it literally can be the foundational method to change your life.
Fantastic. And people want to work with you, what are their options? Is it group or one-on-one? What do you have available currently?
Yeah, so there's a combo of both. So I run a group, a community called the Gutsy Collective. And it's a group of women that are wanting to make those positive changes, but just need the guidance, support, and accountability. So every week I'm sending them short, sweet audios to give them something tangible to work on. And then we have the community together where there's conversations. You have a place to actually ask somebody a question, right? To get the support. We have accountability built in. It's just phenomenal. And then I do one-on-one coaching as well. Got a couple of different programs where we can do single sessions, 6-week programs, or a couple of months at a time.
Awesome. So many options. Thank you so much for your time today, Laura, and for sharing your Powerback process with us. For our listeners, I will have links in the show notes as I always do. And I will be back next week with another episode of Stop Overthinking. Thank you for listening to the Stop Overthinking podcast with Kristen Odegaard. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who would benefit from the message. To learn more about working with me and links to social media and free resources, head over to my website, coachwithkristen.com. That's Kristen spelled Kristen. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. Have a great week.